Hello everyone, this is Venom Geek Media here, and today we are going to be talking about the Andorian Fleet of the 22nd century. Like I say, this is very much picking up where we left off with the Kumari and Akia ship chats, where we're going to be looking at the broader fleet behind those two ships that we see a lot in Enterprise. And the Vulcan ships are all canon. A lot of these Andorian ships are actually non-canon fan designs. They do a good job of filling out the Andorian fleet in a way that is interesting and keeps to their design aesthetic and philosophy. So, we'll get into it. So it's worth mentioning that the Andorians are really the second military power of the 22nd century. There's very few that can compete with them, possibly the Klingons. These are some very, very large and very, very powerful ships. These ships are very much focused on countering the Vulcans. That's why they're so big and built in the way they are. They are very much designed to counter the Vulcan ships. There's a heavy emphasis in Andorian Doctrine on the ability to fight the enemy at range, to have decent armor, and to be a little bit more mobile and agile. You're just not going to win in a direct slugging match with a Dakia. You're going to have to use a bit more of agility and maneuvering and footwork to try and get the advantage over the enemy. It's not going to be just as simple as build a bigger ship. You just can't do it. No one can, realistically speaking. Overall, as a fleet, it's a more active and aggressive formation than the Vulcan fleet. Remember with the Vulcan fleet what I said about you have this divide between the battle fleet, which most of the time just sits and collects dust, and then you have this first response force, but is largely devoted to exploration. If there really is a problem or a war to be fought, then the Vulcans will use their battle fleet, which takes time to mobilize, which is why they have these distinct elements. The Andorians instead operate on a much more active footing. They intend to have all ships at relatively high levels of readiness, and they don't really worry too much about things like science and exploration. All these ships are either built to be defensive or offensive, an aggressive force. What you'll also notice is that there's a far smaller size differential between the smallest Andorian ships and the biggest compared to the Vulcans. Because the Andorians have less ships, and they really intend on having a more self-sufficient fleet of ships that don't necessarily rely on one another for support, because they don't have quite as many. So instead, power projection is the key. It's very, very important for each ship to be pretty capable individually, and then when you bring them together, then fulfill a specific role as part of the battle fleet. So let's get into the specifics of the Andorian fleet. So the first ship we'll be looking at is the smallest, and when I say smallest, it's actually still a decent size. That is the Illithin class destroyer. It's 156 meters long. Now, that's a lot bigger than both the Vulcans and the Deval. We see this in the Enterprise episode, the Kishara, in the final battle between the Andorians and Vulcans. It looks like there's two of them there, and they're smaller, lighter ships. Now, in reality, they are actually just a redress of the Valkyrian shuttle, just upscaled. But, in terms of what it is in universe, effectively what the Illithin is a torpedo boat. It supports larger cruisers by using its torpedo weapons. It has two ventrally mounted torpedo tubes, and then it has two wing-mounted particle cannons. Nothing particularly spectacular going on there, but its torpedo systems are very, very good and very advanced. They're not launchers, they don't accelerate the torpedoes, but the Illithin is built from the ground up to make use of torpedo weapons, and has the appropriate sensors and guidance and tracking systems to be far more effective with its torpedoes than the smaller Vulcans, which was basically a retrofit. But it's basically there to be a torpedo ship. Now, it is slightly less agile and maneuverable than its Vulcan counterpart, the Vulcans and the Deval, but it is very much a realigned support vessel. You've got torpedoes, you've got range. It's very much there to support other vessels, which we'll now get into, because the other vessels are where it gets very interesting. The next up is the Celtra class light cruiser. This has a lot in common with the Kumari. You have on this vessel 2 heavy particle cannons. You also have a very well armoured hull as well. It's quite robust and well protected. What it effectively is a hunter-killer type vessel. You've got a lot of small agile ships in the Vulcan fleet, like the Vulcas, like the Deval, like the Dakir support craft, which can cause you a lot of trouble. And what the Celtra does is hunt those things down. The Celtra is very much built to hunt down those smaller vessels. It's capable of tangling with ships of a similar size. It wouldn't mind going up against a Surak, certainly. But mostly what it is intended to do is, again, protect the Illithin and protect the larger capital ships from small corvettes and destroyers. That is really what the Celtra does as a light cruiser. Next, we have what we actually see in the show, the Kumari class battle cruiser. We have here 4 heavy particle cannons, as well as some auxiliary weapons. It's very well armoured, it can really charge in. You can see by its design, actually, it's a very spindly design in many respects. You have a big concentration of mass in certain areas. A lot of emphasis is being placed on having heavy armour. The idea is that the Kumari is going to have the speed to just basically charge in on a line, fire all its weapons, overshoot the target, fire its rear weapons, and that way it's going to avoid the worst of the Vulcan plasma cannons overshooting its arc. If you spend ages trying to maneuver yourself to keep your bow on the enemy, you're inevitably going to close range, because he's going to do the same thing. He's going to try and keep his bow on you. If you're happy to spend a lot of the engagement overshooting and picking up range, because all the time you're overshooting the enemy, he's got to turn around, which is, again, more time that you can burn away from him and build up a gap where your longer range particle cannons can be more effective. And then again, you can worry about reorienting, and then as you close to medium to short range, then you, boom, accelerate, overshoot again, and he's back to square one. That's kind of how the Kumari was intended to operate, was very much in that sort of, long strafing run kind of attack pattern. And, also very much intended as the sort of basic level command ship. And it works very well with both the Celtra and the Illithin. The Illithin can lend a bit of long-range torpedo support, and the Celtra can protect it from smaller attack craft harassing the Kumari, but it can also support the Kumari in those kind of charges. So the Kumari is very much, again, it's that sort of universal building block around which you can build all sorts of formations. Alright, fourth and finally, we have the Kival class battleship. Now, it's worth saying that this came in during the Romulan War, so we didn't really see any in service until 2160. Because it's quite late, it's worth just taking that with a pinch of salt. The Andorians didn't have any of these in action when Velas was planning his attack in Enterprise Season 4. They weren't going to have any Kival battleships to call on. Now, if they did have the Kival battleship, that might have played out very differently. It was built in relatively limited numbers. It's a big vessel. It's about 400 meters long, which is big for the 22nd century. What you have here is 6 torpedo tubes, 4 fore, 2 aft, which is a good number of torpedo tubes for that kind of era. It's very rare that you see so much dedication to torpedoes. You also have 2 very, very heavy particle cannons in the wings, probably more powerful and longer range and more accurate than the Kumari, so a bit of a step up there as well. And of course you have auxiliary particle cannon arrays located across the ship's hull for close defense. This is a very, very heavily armored battleship. This is the Tonk. This is designed to slug it out with the Vulcan ships and tie them down in a melee and give the rest of the Andorian fleet that freedom to then move and attack as they wish and not worry too much about getting closed down in a melee, because they have the Kival to just sit there and brawl it out with the biggest Vulcan ships. In terms of its capabilities, I would imagine it would have a pretty decent matchup against the Dakia. Remember, it's much newer than the Dakia. Okay, it's smaller, but it's a lot more modern, and unlike the Dakia, which is very large and ponderous in its movements, the Kival is still relatively agile. It's not super fast, but it's probably fast enough to get around the Dakia and get around to its weak spots. So it's certainly a very good matchup against the Dakia. Now again, it is worth mentioning that yes, the Andorians did build these, but they didn't come out till after the Romulan War. So, how fair is it to weigh up when we come to doing our fleet comparison, which is going to be a separate video? How fair is it really going to be to compare these two? We will now look at composition, fleet composition. What we see in the battle in the Kishara is effectively 2 heavy squadrons. These are composed of 2 Kumaris and an Illithin. That's a simple combination. You've got the Kumaris and you've got a torpedo boat to support it. Take 4 of those, you have a heavy battle group, so that actually that could very much easily defeat a Vulcan strike group and hold off probably a Vulcan Dakia battle group. Certainly it's their main response to a Vulcan Dakia battle group is having, you've got then 4, at that point you've got 8 Kumaris against 4 Dakias, and then you've got the Illithins to help support you against other vessels. Then for a light squadron, you have 2 Celtra and 1 Illithin, which is again pretty basic. It's a basic light squadron. You then take 4 of those units and put them together. You go from your light squadron to your light battle group. Now, oftentimes you also will mix in 2 Celtra and a Kumari as well. So perhaps half of those will be Celtra and Illithins, and the other half will be Celtra and Kumaris. But that will be your light battle group. Finally, with the Kival, you have the Kival Battleship Battle Group, which is a Kival plus 2 Illithin and 4 Celtra, so that's 7 ships. That's a pretty impressive battleship battle group. They're very much modelling it on the Dakia battle group, which again has a whole load of smaller vessels attached to support it. Now, the big thing that it's worth pointing out is that you've got elements there in the Kival battle group which are going to be capable of peeling off and doing their own things and support other elements of the fleet, while the Kival perhaps goes toe-to-toe with the Dakia. So, in total, we are looking at, for the Andorian fleet, circa 2160, so after the Romulan Earth War. When we were talking about the Vulcan fleet, we were very much talking about the Vulcan fleet in around about 2150 before the Romulan War. So that would be composed of 3 heavy battle groups, 5 light battle groups, and 4 battleship battle groups, totaling 124 vessels, which again is actually small, but it's a little bit less than the Vulcans. And the Vulcans, again, as I mentioned, probably have far more extensive reserves to call on, and a lot of those Vulcan ships are actually quite cheap and cheerful. All these Andorian ships are actually very high-tech, very expensive vessels, because the Andorians are just racing to catch up with the Vulcans and compete with them. So, losing a Kumari for the Andorians is not the same as the Vulcans losing a Surak. Losing a Illithin for the Andorians is way worse than the Vulcans losing a Vulcas. So it's worth bearing that in mind. Really what we see here is a fleet that is undergoing rapid modernization and is very much evolving to combat a very specific threat. And which is why you see a lot of almost hyper specialization into specific areas. This is a very specialized fleet, and not really many ships None of the ships in the Andorian fleet are really too generalized in their use. They are all capable of independent operations and going off and doing things on their own, which a lot of ships in the Vulcan fleet aren't necessarily capable of. But, they're all tactically oriented. More specifically, they are oriented towards countering specific Vulcan vessels and specific Vulcan tactics. And that is really why we see such interesting and such strange designs from the Andorians in this period. The Vulcans were somewhat stagnant in the 22nd century. Compare that to the Andorians, where it's just boom, 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 boom. Here's each generation of new ship, and we've basically only got possibly 2 generations of ships here. In terms of difference, I can certainly see the Kival and the Illithin being from the same generation and possibly being a little bit newer than the Kumari and Seltra, but only by about 10 years, 10-15 years at the most. As compared to the Vulcan ships, which some of them have decades between them. So the Vulcan fleet was very clearly stagnant in this period, and the Andorians were very clearly catching up, and catching up fast. So next time, let's see how they stack up. Thank you all for watching. I will now thank my members. My Navarchs, David Reeves, Jeffrey Ballard, and Tully DT. My Commanders, Miami Jules, Captain's Quarters, Chase Rector, PQSK, Philip Ty, Jeff Hallam, Bird Monster, Mark Philippe, Robert Sampson, Sean Farrell, Guillermo Martinez, Das Blas, Adam Bowman, and Nathaniel Mead. And I salute my Centurions, Pendlebury, BOS Domestic Disputes, Marcus Hall, Paul Lash, Julian Arnott, Freedom Trooper, Oculcatum Questo, Squadra Course, and Gabe Logan. Thank you guys for supporting the channel, and I will see you all in the next video.